kind of going to do two things here. The Federal Reserve just put this out yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. It was May 6th, I guess. Two Q&As on flood insurance relative to COVID-19. The first question just basically says, if you're doing modifications, they're triggering events for the flood insurance rules and the game that has to be played there. So if you modify a loan, just know that you have to play the flood game. That's not the big part of the Q&As. It's the second Q&A that deals with forced placement. And there's been this issue between the guidance that was put, or actually not even guidance, the protocol for the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, for the grace period for flood insurance renewals. So those policies traditionally had a 30-day waiting period. Well, for COVID-19, they expanded it to 120 days on the policy or the insurance side. But that didn't change the bank rules. And that's what we've kind of been reiterating all along, is the flood rules aren't changing. You still have to follow the forced placement rules. Well, the regulatory agencies, prior to this Federal Reserve Q&A that came out yesterday, earlier in April, I want to say they put out this kind of interagency thing that says we're going to be lenient in the times of COVID-19, unspecific to any one specific regulation. The Federal Reserve came out hard and fast yesterday and said, all right, for forced placement of flood, we're going to give you some options for how you want to tackle this 120-day grace period. You can follow the normal protocol, send out your 45-day notice, and if they don't have the policy by the end of the 45-day period, go ahead and force place. That's the normal set of circumstances. You can still do that. They're also going to say that if it's related to COVID-19 and this 120-day grace period, you can actually wait on sending out your 45-day notice up until 45 days prior to the end of the 120-day grace period. So you can delay it, but you will be expected to have forced placed insurance ready to go on day 121 when that 120-day grace period expires. So that's hard and fast guidance from the Federal Reserve. And if you want links to that, we sent out a blog yesterday. You can get that through our website. You can track down that information. What about the other regulatory agencies? Well, the OCC, earlier in April, and then they updated it on the 27th, they came out and said, they provided some guidance that said, we're going to back off on enforcement relative to flood insurance and including this 45-day forced placement thing during COVID-19. They didn't get as specific in their guidance, okay, back in April about waiting till the 45 days for the end of the 120-day grace period. They weren't as specific as the OCC, or at least I didn't think so. This morning, one of our clients sent us an email in reference to that blog that went out yesterday and said, oh, the OCC did say the same thing as the Fed. Well, they did, but not exactly publicly. They did a verbal, which is really hard to go on. But then I find out this morning, just before this thing started, that they wrote a letter in response to a Mortgage Bankers Association's question, and they provided written guidance, but only to the MBA, not publicly to everybody. I even went and tried to Google this thing to see if it could be publicly found. No, you have to have the link to the Mortgage Bankers Association website to get at the guidance for the OCC that's supposed to resemble the Fed guidance that came out yesterday. So that's where the OCC stands. If you're not regulated by one of those two, it's kind of, you're going to have to figure out what your regulator expects there because they haven't put anything out on this.
Right.